Talking about Russia's economy, Donald Trump seems convinced that Putin will stop the war if oil prices drop by another $10. Sure, Russia might slow down when it runs out of money, but how close are we really to that scenario? And more importantly, can we actually expect, as you said about sanctions, like very, very strong sanctions and strong enough to make that happen?
Well, the thing about sanctions, Sophia, is that they do work, but they work very slowly. There's no sort of overnight sort of big strike, if you like, well, with sanctions. They often take years, particularly against large countries like Russia that have borders with many countries, trading relations with many countries, lots of possibility to avoid the sanctions, as you see with the Russian shadow fleet to transport its oil around the globe. And what really counts is Russian war production. And there the evidence is, unfortunately, that Russia has, despite the sanctions, preserved an enormous capacity for war production. And they're now producing nearly 200 drones every day at their plant in Tatarstan. They've doubled their production of ballistic missiles from 44 a month just 1 year ago to now nearly 90 a month. And since Trump returned to the White House in January, believe it or not, despite his statements that he can put pressure on Putin and make peace with Russia, the number of Russian drones and missiles that have been fired against Ukraine has doubled under Trump vis-a-vis the Biden administration. The statistic which I looked up is about 11,500 in the last 6 months of the Biden administration to nearly 28,000 in the first 6 months of Trump's administration. So the threat of sanctions has not so far convinced Putin to slow down his attacks against Ukraine, and Russia has shown this ability to maintain very, very high rhythm of war production. So yes, over a period of time, if the sanctions were really comprehensive and effective, particularly against, as I say, countries that trade with Russia or supply Russia with important missile components, electronic components, it would slow Russia down. And Russia has been depending on oil to get about $145 billion a year in earnings, which of course have fueled the war. But the problem is that Russia has a large production capability, a large treasure chest, if you like, so that that's not going to happen in the next year or two. So the only way to stop Putin is to supply Ukraine with weapons, to stop Russia on the battlefield, to inflict greater military losses on Russia, and to prevent Putin believing that he can win the war. Then he will, I think, change his calculus. So I'm afraid this is a military issue, to my mind, far more than an economic issue.
Right before our interview, headlines exploded with talk that Putin might offer an air truce, no flight attacks, but no end to the war, just in order to please Trump. And even Lukashenko brought it up during his meeting with Putin, and then they talked to the press. But I'm here in Kiev, and last night, I think as usual, Russia was bombing Ukraine again. So should we take these truce reports seriously at all? I mean, if Moscow really wanted to stop the strikes, it could do that anytime, right?
Yes, we've been here before, Sophia, as you very well know, better than I, being in Kiev. Putin has offered these temporary sort of halts to the air bombardment, normally associated with Easter or Christmas, some sort of religious holiday. They've only lasted a couple of days. In the meantime, Ukrainians have reported that Russian strikes have continued on parts of Ukraine despite these truces, although maybe not so much Kiev or Lvov or Kharkiv or Kherson, the big cities, but more in the east. But of course, Putin has often associated these truces with lots of conditions imposed on Ukraine, unacceptable conditions that, for example, Ukraine would have to stop recruiting soldiers during this period, or would not be able to receive any more Western weapons or support, or Ukraine would not be able to bring reinforcements up to the front line. And So, of course, Putin would try to use this pause not for a real ceasefire, but simply to gain a military advantage before the aggression starts again. So we'll have to be very careful. The devil is always in the detail here. But there's another thing that makes me skeptical, quite frankly, which is that at the moment, again, unfortunately, Putin is having some success with the aerial bombardment. He's able to fly 400, 500 missiles and drones against Ukraine virtually every evening. He knows that Ukraine's air defenses have been seriously depleted. He knows that the Patriot systems promised by Germany, United States and others will take time to arrive, to set up. So he knows that he's getting an advantage with this at the moment. And once Putin feels he has a military advantage, he doesn't give it up very easily. So while Ukraine rebuilds its air defenses with Western support, the American weapons, the new European packages that are due to arrive, he probably feels that this summer is a good opportunity to press that advantage home. So I'm skeptical about this. These are normally more for propaganda purposes than being sincerely intended.